Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About Houses. I'm Todd.
I'm Juana.
Okay, so today is a very special day. First of all, we're going to talk about all these foreclosures that you've been hearing about from the Crash Bros.
Okay, so Todd has spent hours, no, seriously, I'm absolutely dead serious. He has spent hours researching foreclosures while I was researching shoes. So you know it was a long time because you know I was online looking at shoes for a long time. So this is going to be a fantastic video. We've been discussing foreclosures for hours. You know, get 2 cups of coffee and hang tight. It's going to be amazing.
Okay. The other thing, so that's the content of the video. The other thing we're excited to talk about here is that we are about 20 videos away from our 1,000th video.
Right.
It's a huge milestone. It's completely arbitrary that it's 1,000 videos, but that's just like a big number.
It is a big number.
Because after 1,000, who knows what happens. But so what we've done is we went back and looked at how many uploads we have on the channel. Of course, we're going to number them so that, and then on the 1,000th video, we're going to do a special video. I don't know what we're going to do yet, but we're going to do a special thing. Maybe we'll have Elon Musk or somebody. I don't know. Probably not. He's probably...
Okay. When he says that he's going to number them, he's only numbering like the next 20 videos.
Yeah, I'm not going to go back, Rich. We were numbering them. I stopped numbering them at like 500 or 600, 5 something. I stopped, and I just put the title. I stopped numbering them a long time ago. So, okay, all right. So this is what we're going to talk about. So here's the setup for this. So is the Crash Bros have all talked about these millions of foreclosures,
right? And you know, as he was starting to research this, and he was naming off numbers, I'm going, okay, wait a minute. You know, do the Crash Bros have something? So hang tight and you'll kind of see where the Crash Bros are coming from.
Okay. So I was having a conversation with a friend who's really smart, and his exact words to me were, JP Morgan Chase is sitting on a bunch of REOs that they have yet to release. And of course, you know, you've seen the numbers nationally for foreclosures, the pre-foreclosures. There aren't any. Mm-hmm. The only way there could be foreclosures if they'd foreclosed in the past and somehow we're still sitting on these non-performing assets, REOs. Mm-hmm. And then I remembered something. I have an MBA. Like I literally went to graduate school for 2 years and got an MBA. And I'm really good at one thing. Among other things, I know how to read a damn income statement and a balance sheet. I know where everything is on those things. Like I literally spent like every semester we had a class on what was called financial accounting. So we understand what the balance sheets, income statements, what everything is, generally accepted accounting practices and all these other things. And not only that, because her and I have sold thousands of REOs, bank-owned homes, real estate owned, I know exactly where to find these. So what did I do? I went and found JP Morgan Chase 2022 federal filing on their balance sheet. And here it is on the screen. This one specific thing, you can go find this for yourself. You can see this is not something I made up. This is their credit portfolio. Over here, they have their credit exposure for all credit-related assets. They also have their non-performing assets. In that column that says non-performing 2022, if you go down, real estate owned 203. These are in millions. If you look there under total credit portfolio, it says in millions. They have 203 million of real estate that they own in non-performing assets. So this is basically foreclosed, meaning it's real estate owned because now they own the real estate.
Right. This is not 203 million homes. So that's kind of...
No.
This is $203 million.
Okay.
Now, if we know that, you know, what's the median price of homes in the U.S.?
Okay, so the median price of homes is about $400,000. Mm-hmm. So doing math, this would be 500. Okay, but it gets better. This is actually all real estate that JP Morgan Chase has foreclosed. Mm-hmm. This includes commercial. Mm-hmm. This is not just REO. This is all real estate. So this includes commercial. Actually, reading through, there was a whole page before this that mostly talked about commercial. Mm-hmm. This is actually mostly commercial. There are literally no homes. Like this isn't, there aren't even 500 homes in there that Wells Fargo has foreclosed on. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, that JP Morgan Chase is foreclosed on.
Right. Wells Fargo actually, and we'll talk about that, but
yeah.
Wells Fargo actually has even less.
Okay. Then what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to go look at Wells Fargo. Because remember, Wells Fargo only recently, within the last 6 months, said they weren't going to originate any more loans. So I went and looked at the Wells Fargo annual filing for 2022. And as you can see here, non-performing assets, if you look over there, it says total foreclosed assets. This is commercial and residential real estate. They have 137 million, which is basically, if most of this is going to be commercial loans, office space, industrial, things like that were foreclosed. Right, but at 400,000 a house, they literally don't have any. They have no houses.
Right. So when you consider, things like malls and commercial, so even if we ascribe all of this to residential, it's very few homes. But when you realize that this includes commercial and that sort of thing, now all of a sudden the residential becomes beyond negligible.
Okay. So then I figured it out. If JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo, the two largest banks, don't have between them not even 1,000 REOs. They don't have any REOs. They literally don't have any. Okay. And we worked with both of those lenders in the past. We used to be Chase Direct and Wells Fargo Direct. Okay. Matter of fact, I was the second largest Wells Fargo agent in the nation. My cap was 120 and only was one agent in 150. It means at any time I could have 120 Wells Fargo REOs. Okay. I probably had more REOs at one time back in 2009-ish than Wells Fargo has nationally. Meaning in 2009, I personally, in my Wells Fargo platform that had all the REOs, we would sell one, the next day we'd get one, right? If we had a closing, we'd get one the next day. They just aren't out there. So I figured it out, Juana.
Okay.
Fannie Mae. All of these loans were sold on the secondary market. And when that happens, they become the purview of Fannie Mae. So when they get foreclosed, it's Fannie Mae has got all the millions of foreclosures, right? They've got to have millions of foreclosures.
Sure.
And you would know this because you've sold, of the 2,000 plus REOs you've sold, how many were Fannie Mae?
Probably close to 1,000.
Yeah, maybe, 1,000. There were a bunch of Freddies in there and other
Freddie, Wells Fargo, and other ones, yeah.
But Fannie by far is the largest.
Yes.
They would have by far the most REO. Like they would have more than they would have over half of them.
Yes.
All other REO banks, everybody else would have. The only assets they would have is stuff that they held in their portfolio and then decided to foreclose on.
Right. So Fannie Mae, when I was doing Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Wells Fargo, and all these, Fannie Mae was easily 4 or 5 times more than the next one, and the next one would have been Freddie. Okay.
The other thing is it's only going to be residential because Fannie Mae doesn't deal with commercial. They only deal with residential.
Right. And then lastly, remember Fannie Mae picks up the riskier parts of the riskier loans because they tend to be FHA loans, and those have lower down payments. They have lower credit scores, so they tend to be riskier loans. So they tend to have a higher rate of foreclosure.
Okay, so I went because Fannie Mae has to file federal 10K just like every other corporation does, and I went and found their single family REO properties. Here it is right here. Now we have 3 columns. This is the year ending 2020, 2021, 2022. Financial accounting, we always put the most current year all the way to the left. So we'll start back in 2020. At the beginning of the year, it had 17,000. They acquired, as you can see, in the 4 different regions of the U.S., all those REOs with 6,000 acquisitions. They sold 15,000 in 2020, which is a very, very small number. And they finished the year with about 8,000. Now this is numbers of houses. This is not in millions of dollars like the last sheet was, okay? Then if you go to 2022, that 7973 carries to the top. And then you can see what they acquired. They totally acquired 4,120, but they sold about 5,000. It's actually sold more than they'd acquired that year, and they finished the year with 7,000. Then in 2022, that 7166 carries to the top. They acquired about 4,800. This is for the whole year of 2022. This is the largest REO servicing company that there would possibly be. Had an entire 4,800 REOs. They'd sold about 3,200, and they're currently sitting on 8,000 REOs.
And this is nationwide. Now, how many homes do we have nationwide, Mr. Miller?
140 million. So if you look down to that little red thing that I've circled, single family foreclosure rate, and you go over 2022, the rate for foreclosures was 0.03%. It was 0.03%.
Okay, this is less than you were getting in your checking account when you were getting a 2% mortgage.
This means 3 of every 10,000 homes were foreclosed. 3 of every 10,000 homes.
Right.
Okay. It's an incredibly negligible number. What's really amazing on this is the REO net sales price to unpaid principal balance. They got 114% of whatever they were owed when they foreclosed. That was the net for the foreclosure sale, which is really ridiculous. Even short sales, that they got 91%. So the question goes, why do people believe that what was happening in 2020 that made people believe there were going to be millions of foreclosures, or that the foreclosures happened? Like, where the hell did they go? What was happening in something happened in 2020, I just don't remember.
Wasn't it that thing? What's it called? Oh, I remember COVID.
COVID. I don't even remember.
Okay. So remember, we had COVID. The government kept everybody from working, and so people weren't getting sufficient income to meet their financial obligations. But remember, the government stepped in and said, hey, all you got to do is call your mortgage servicer and say the word COVID, and you get 6 months, basically no payments. And at the end of the 6 months, if you're still affected by COVID, you call up the servicer again and you say COVID, and they're going to give you another 6 months. So basically, people got a year of reprieve from their mortgage payments. That meant that there was no negative action taken against them. It didn't go against their credit. Nothing bad happened to them. And during this time, the banks were doing workouts. They were doing loan modifications with people, right?
Okay.
So this is really important, because we're gonna talk about that in a minute. So those loan modifications, they varied. Some basically did kind of like a second on the house, where you still kept your original loan, but then whatever you were behind, you had that for a period of time until that was cleared. So that was in order to catch up. Other people got it tacked onto the back of their loan. So let's say that you had 25 years left on your loan. Now you're going to have 26 years left on your loan. Whatever workout they did. So they did all kinds of creative things to help people out, not out of the goodness of their heart, but because banks understand a couple things. First of all, foreclosures are expensive. Even when they're getting 114%, they're still expensive. And foreclosures, just optically, they don't look good.
They're not politically correct.
They're not politically correct. So
especially when you need to go to Congress and get money for things potentially in the future.
Right.
You don't want to be the bank that foreclosed on a bunch of people.
Right. So keeping all of this in mind, plus the mandate from Congress, there were all these workouts, and everything turned out pretty good.
So here's a chart. These are the completed loan workouts in billions of dollars. Okay. Now, a lot of people probably remember the number of homes that were in late payment. This was called default. Now, this wasn't notice default, meaning foreclosure. This means they had missed a payment. It was 4 million. It was a very big number. Those 4 million homes, one of 3 things happened. One is they just sold the house. They just put it on the market and sold it, right straight up, right then, okay? Because they had equity, and they just said, hey, I'm missing payments, I'm just going to sell the house, okay? Now remember, there were over 4 million sales in 2020. So some of those were people who just said, I'm just behind, I lost my job, I'm just going to sell the house to get the money, okay? The other people were the green. These were modifications. These were modifications to the term of the loan, like a significant modification to the term of the loan.
Right. So like I said, if you had 25 years left on the loan, now maybe you had 26 years left on the loan. So that's a loan modification.
Okay. The next one were payment deferrals. Payment deferral means, okay, you still have to give us this money, but we're going to give you 24 months. We're going to defer what you owe us. So you owe us $5,000. We're going to give you 24 months to pay us $5,000. We'll defer those payments. You can pay us, you have to pay us like in a year, you have to pay this much or whatever. Okay, so you can see there were some loan modifications, but most of this was deferred. And if you look at this chart in 2020, there were about 300 billion in total modifications and payments. And then in 2021, which is a bigger year because you had the cumulative effect of people saying, look, I haven't worked in 6, 7, 8 months now. Now it's 2022. So you had 342 billion. And of course, in 2021, in 2022, you had only 167 because people had gone back to work, or people had so much equity, they had just dealt with it, or they'd sold it, right? They were back in the mode where they could just sell the house and get out of it, right? So all of those people, literally all of them, you exercise one of those three things. How do you think that? Because the crash bros remember the number of 4 million homes and they got all excited. Ooh, 4 million houses in default. They're all going to be REOs. But they all either did one of these three things. What percentage of these modifications and payment deferrals do you think, just guessing, ended up being successful? Like the people got back on track, they went back to making their payments, or they actually made up all of their deferred payments. Meaning the total end of the term didn't change. They just made back up all the payments they had missed 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever months payment.
I would assume that most of them, and the probably almost all of them, because when you look at the unemployment numbers, unemployment is really low, which means everybody's back to work. People are in a better financial footing, and wages have gone up, so people have had the opportunity to get caught up. So all things being equal, I think that almost everybody is all caught up.
Okay. Well, we actually know the exact numbers because Fannie Mae, who did all these loan modifications, tracked all this. Here's the chart. You'll see it on the bottom of the screen. If you're watching this on your phone, you may not be able to see the numbers. If you're watching on TV, they'll be able to see them very clearly. Okay, so we have 1 and 2 year post modification. The reason why you don't see anything under 2021 modifications for 2 years is we haven't had 2 full years since 2021. So the first one we would see would be Q1, but this was Fannie Mae's 2022 end of year statement. Okay, so the first quarter of 2020, a year later, 65% of the people had fully made up all their late payments. Okay, by the second quarter, a year later, 71%. But then look what happens in Q3 and 4. 94 and 93% of those people fully. So remember, we've got 4 million people, but we hit 94% of 4 million people. And all of a sudden, you're down to like a few 100,000 people who are behind on their thing, right? Then you go into 2021, and you get the people who did loan modifications in 2021. 88 to 92% of those people a year later fully have made up. Now we don't know. Some of these may have been 3, 4, 5 year repayment plans, right? The other thing too is, remember, some of these people paid off the loans. Well, when you go to that bottom line and look at the Q1 of 2020 mods, 80% of them 2 years post modification were all paid off, and then 97, 96%. So what we expect to see when we see the 2021 modifications, which was the big year, we're going to see numbers that look like that 97, 96 or higher, because we're already at 90%. 90, so we're going to see high 90% for 2 year modifications. So I'm going to paint the big picture now. We had COVID. We had a bunch of people who got behind on their mortgage payments, about 4 million people. The 4 million people went to the banks and said, hey guys, we have this problem. We're out of work, yada, yada. The banks either did a loan mod or they did a repayment plan. Hey, you got 2 years to make up all your payments, or they sold the house. And it was super successful. That's what these numbers show. It was super successful because when you look at the number of homes that Fannie Mae is actually foreclosed on, there were very few. We're talking thousands, right? Not millions, thousands. When you look at the total REO assets of JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo combined, it's under 400 million total for the 2 largest banks, 400 million for total REOs for real estate. It's not enough. There are literally, okay, Juana, so devil's advocate. There are people out there going to say, but Todd, those banks have secretly foreclosed. And they're not going to show them on the bank because they don't want to alert people that they have all these and scare people. What, do you think they can do that? Can the publicly traded company just hide all these toxic assets and not put them on the balance sheet?
Well, okay, so I suppose they could,
Okay.
but I don't think that they do. Then the reason I don't think that they do is because it's illegal and there's really nothing to be gained by it. Look, if the regulators catch wind of fraudulent disclosures, that's a bigger problem than whatever toxic assets they may have. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, you can make the argument that they're doing all kinds of illegal shenanigans, but then, I'm assuming that they're doing other illegal shenanigans, so then we have bigger problems.
Yeah. And we already did a video just a few days ago where we talked about the REOs in Vegas. And I found out we were the second highest in the nation.
Right.
We were second highest in the nation for foreclosures. And it was 0.07%. The number of foreclosures in Las Vegas was like 141 or something for the year, which is one every 3 days.
I think one of the really important takeaways from this is how successful the loan mod programs were, how successful all of these programs that the banks put together during COVID were, because I think this is a model going forward.
Yeah.
Look, they learned the last time around that foreclosures didn't win them any friends and lost them a lot of money. So this was a new approach, both by the government and the banks, and I think it was really successful. I think that they may iterate on this going forward, not just for major catastrophic things like COVID, but maybe for other smaller events, maybe that are even just personal to somebody and not national events. So I think it'll be interesting to see how these lessons learned percolate through their business practice going forward.
There was a Substack I read where this guy did an analysis of vacant owner-occupied homes, meaning homes that were not rentals, that were owner-occupied, and the percentage of vacancy. And the vacancy percentage was 0.7%. So it's like 1 in every 130 houses or so were vacant. And he went and pulled all of the census data because the U.S. Census this is something they've measured since 1957. It's the lowest ever recorded.
Right.
People are staying in the houses. They're not leaving the houses. This rate was up to 13% at one point during the last housing crash. 13% of homes that were designated owner-occupant, meaning the people who bought the house, basically these are just people who have left the house and it's vacant. It's not in some state of rental. The rental vacancy rate is under 5%. It's 4 and change, but that's pretty normal because if you have a rental and your tenant moves out, you put it back on the market and it takes 15 days and you get a new tenant, then that's like 5% of the year, right? It's going to be vacant 5% of the year all the time. So if you take all of the rentals in the US, they're basically all rented. We have almost the lowest rate of non-rented properties, and we have the lowest rate of non-occupied homes. And it all points to one thing. We have significant shortage of housing. We have other stats that we're going to go through. We're going to do other videos on this, but I want to throw that in there. And what Wanda said is exactly accurate. The government has put enough pressure over the years on banks. And the banks and Fannie Mae and everybody have figured out they're not just going to willy-nilly foreclose. The states are not just going to let them do it. That's why the notice of default numbers are absolutely pathetic all over the nation. When Vegas is the second highest rate of foreclosures in the nation, and we're foreclosing on 0.07%, and in Las Vegas, we had 141 foreclosures in the last year. And the notice of default rate, which is the current numbers, aren't any different than they were last year. What it says is in the next year, we're going to have another, 140, 150 foreclosures total. There's no millions of foreclosures.
Right. So, I know that everybody wants to know, well, how will I know, what's happening? Because if the banks are not a good bellwether, how do I know? Well, so Fannie Mae is a good way of looking at it, because take a look at what Fannie Mae is doing, because that tells you what's happening in the residential market. If you're just looking at the REO that the banks have, remember, those are combined assets. Those combine commercial and residential. So your best idea of what's happening in the foreclosure space for residential is actually looking at the Fannie Mae numbers, not looking at the bank numbers, because of the way those are reported and they're combined.
When people say the bank foreclosed, that's a euphemism from the Great Depression, when banks did all the lending. Most foreclosures by far that we sold were Fannie and Freddie. And I was doing Fannie from outsourcers. So Fannie would go to outsource companies, say, hey, we have all these foreclosures, we can't handle them in-house. They'd hire these asset management companies. And then I was a primary, there were only a couple of us in Nevada or in Vegas that were primary Fannie outsourcers, meaning the outsourcers they had only a few agents they could pick from. And I was one of them because one was already the direct Fannie Mae and they wanted to use me. So they told the outsourcers you have to use Todd. And eventually started using Wanda too. So between us, probably 2,000 to 3,000 houses we sold were Fannie Mae. Fannie and Freddie have all the foreclosures, mostly Fannie. So just look at what Fannie, we're going to probably in another year pull up their, numbers and go see what the final result of all the loan mods have been. But everyone sold the house and they solved it that way, or they made up their payments, or they just got the payment stuck on the end and there's no foreclosures. They're just, I'm sorry guys, they're not out there. And they can make videos all they want about how the banks are, the funniest one I saw, I just read the title, the banks are preparing to foreclose. Like what they do, exercises. They do the special foreclosure exercise. Like, how do you prepare to foreclose? You have to file notice of default. And they're not being filed. We can see in Las Vegas, we're the second highest market in the U.S. of foreclosures. And we can see how many are filed every month. And it's like a super pathetic number. It's like basically none. There are no foreclosures.
Right. So what did you think? Did you learn something in the video? Was it what you thought? Was it confirmation bias? Was it new information? We want to know, what your thoughts are. We appreciate all the feedback. And we like suggestions for future videos. We appreciate those too. Please like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you'll get notified when we put another video out. Clearly we are on the...
And share it to every social platform you have. Text message it to everybody you know. Share it on 4chan and everything.
There you go. Because we are marching toward our 1,000th video.
We're super excited to get to 1,000.
We are. This is our misspent youth, right? Doing videos.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.